All right, we can already see a lot of comments from not a viewer. All
Yeah,
right,
what do you
how's
think that
everyone?
could possibly be?
Do we hear someone? Do
I
we
don't know.
hear
Do
someone?
you? It's a very good question. Does StreamYard
All
suppose
right, hey
suppose hosts?
everyone. Okay, we can see someone's talking. Obviously, someone's on the stream. So let me add them to the stream before we get started.
Hey all. Maybe you recognize me. Maybe you don't. If you don't, well, you know where to follow me on Twitter. I'm just gonna go ahead and plug that, get that out of the way.
I like this comment from We Codes.
Yeah. Nope. Ah. Were you imagining things so Ricky?
Hey everyone. Actually, if this is
Hey Atul. Hey Khalid. By the way, congratulations. Saw your acceptance. Great job, dude. I saw how you handled developer days and massive shout out. Yeah.
all right, we have people tuning in from Facebook as well. I've never seen anyone tune in from Facebook for my streams before, so that's new.
I'm honored that you chose to put up with Facebook to watch this stream.
Alrighty, so like I said, this stream wasn't planned, and we're back on a short notice, and I'm so glad you guys could still tune in. So, Shrikant, do you want to tell us why we're here? Because quite honestly, I'm more the learner here today, rather than
I
the.
mean, you just sent me a link and said join StreamYard, and I joined. Are we supposed to be here doing something?
Oh no, but that's okay. We can just test your knowledge. So basically, what happened was I was talking to a couple of hackers, and they weren't sure about how you do your awesome hacks. So we're just trying to see if you really know what you know.
Right. So this is going to be a test of my skills, one which I'm going to fail miserably, but a test nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, if you fail at this point, considering I was the learner a couple of minutes back, I failed.
Yes. But jokes aside, we're here to talk about web. What was that again? Yes, web scraping, folks. Uh, yeah, so it's something that uh, it was probably my gateway into CS in general. I just started by thinking about the problems that I could solve, and web scraping tended to be a part of most of those, and that's kind of how I got into tech. So yeah, super excited to be talking about it today, and hopefully anyone from the audience, hopefully someone takes something away from this. That's all I can hope for at this point.
See, this is how you should start with your expectations. Low expectations are always a good way to go.
Exactly.
All right, sure, smart mind. I'll definitely look into your project if you've sent it to me. All right, so Shikant, do you want us to get started?
Yeah, we've got about 14 people, which is kind of how much we can expect at 1:45 in the morning. Uh, so I don't think we're going to do better than this. So just let's get started. Um, so yeah, folks, this is going to be web scraping 101. I'm by the end of this session, I'm hopefully going to have taught you what web scraping is, why you might want to dabble in it, why you should do it, why you shouldn't do it, and how you can get started. It's meant to be
Also,
something that's very basic. Ideally, you know how to write a few lines of code, but even if you don't, no worries, right?
all right, so you can know that you guys, we'll know you guys are keeping track if I know what Shikar is saying, because I'm super new to this as well. I mean, I've heard the name before. I have seen a lot of
Shrikant?
great projects on. I'm sorry.
No, my
All right.
internet is just playing games with me right now. So apologies if you hear my audio 10 seconds after my video, or vice versa.
Alrighty. So, well, you know me. I'm your old coach now, considering I've done 3 streams already. Uh, you can follow me on these
If
dates,
three
but let's
streams,
talk about the person.
I mean, if three streams make you old, I am ancient here. Uh,
That is true. That is true. Shrikaran's gone on way more MLH streams than I have before I joined the MLH community as a coach. So really, I'm definitely all right. So again, but you know me, I've been blabbing all through the week. So I'm gonna let Shrikaran introduce himself.
so I actually put some effort into my introduction slide, unlike Ritvi, whose slide you just saw a couple of seconds ago. I'm sure she just copy pasted an image from somewhere and threw it onto the slide just because she had to do an introductory slide. You should honestly learn from Ryan, Jack, and Mary. But yeah, okay. So who am I? I'm just some guy who's been hanging around the server for quite some time now. I work as a DevRel engineer at a company called Dasha AI, where we work on conversational AI. You may recognize his name from a couple of streams past, right? I'm also a serial hacker. I basically spend all of my time outside of work at some hackathon or the other. I hack, I mentor, I judge, I organize, I sponsor. You'll see me all over the place. Now, I am not an emulator. I'm most definitely not an emulator, just so none of you folks are confused. Um, and yeah, often you'll find me shit posting on Twitter, memeing, and if if you feel like it, if you feel like making my day, you can go follow me on Twitter. And the reason I'm here doing this workshop is because I have done way too much web scraping uh, for it to even be healthy for me. So yeah, I hope I picked up something from the 3 years of doing web scraping that I can impart to you today. So yeah, Rithi, next slide, please.
Yeah, I see a very interesting comment.
Yes, ancient like Manny from Ice Age. Manny was the mammoth, right? Not the squirrel. What was the name of the squirrel again?
I'm not an Ice Age person.
Okay. So yeah, let's. I mean, without further ado, let's get started. So, what is web scraping? That's kind of the biggest question that we want to answer here. And well, the subtitle is all Ritvi's credit. All of the horrible jokes that you see here, you can attest to Ritvi. All of the good jokes are pretty much mine, effectively, right? So web scraping is, well, as the name says, it is scraping the web. And what are you doing here? You're trying to programmatically pull information that's listed on the World Wide Web. Why would you want to do that? Well, we'll see that in the next slide. But in general, there's a wealth of knowledge out there that you may want to use to analyze, do whatever you want, right? So web scraping kind of involves getting all of that data off of the web for you to work with. So yeah, why don't we? Why scrape the web? Because data. Okay, so I'll just walk through a couple of use cases here. Now, let's say you want to build something that tracks prices on Amazon, right? You scrape the web. You go scrape the Amazon page of the product that you want to. It is legally stealing. Well, I wouldn't call it stealing because most of the information on the World Wide Web is in the public domain, so it's all legally scrapable, if that's a word. But yes, I will come to the legalities of web scraping in a couple of slides now. What's the difference between web scraping and search engine if both search of data, right? So search engines actually use something called web crawlers, which is, let's just say, it works as follows, right? A search engine visits a web page, it sees a bunch of links there, it crawls out to each and every single one of those links, grabs the information there, crawls out to each and every single one of those links in those web pages as well, to essentially try and index every single page, every single bit of information on the internet, right? Web scrapers are far, far simpler than that. Usually, you're just trying to get a fixed amount of data because you know what you're looking for, right? And both use the same underlying technology, except when you use a search engine, you got to do it manually. You got to interact with an interface. You got to interact with the search engine to get the data. Whereas if you're scraping the web, you are able to pull it programmatically whenever you're running some code, and then use that in whatever you're building, right? And I mean that's kind of why I'm walking through some use cases now. So let's say you want to track prices of something across different dates. I want to buy a MacBook Pro, but I am not willing to spend $1,000 on it, right? So I want to make sure that I get it at its cheapest price possible. So I go on Amazon, I pick out the product page for the M1 MacBook Pro, and every let's say half a day or so, I scrape the page, essentially getting all of the data from it. I get the HTML, I can get the CSS if I wish to, I can get the JavaScript that runs it if I wish to, but in this case we're looking at the HTML. From the HTML, I can grab the price of the MacBook if I can identify where that price is listed, and on a daily basis I can do comparisons to make sure that whenever the price drops I get a notification. This was actually one of the first things that I built out with Python when I learned to scrape the web. So yeah, you can build neat little projects like that. And on a larger scale, let's say you're getting into data science, right? And the first node in any data science pipeline, in the pipeline for any data science project, is essentially gathering data. You need to have data if you want to analyze it and derive conclusions. And the best way and the easiest way to gather this data is to scrape the web, right? That's nice. Looks like Atul created the same project this hackathon. It's a really fun project to build out, and when it works, it gives you that dopamine hit that you really cannot get anywhere else. But yeah, that's I rambled on for a little bit, but that's kind of why you want to scrape the web. You can build a lot of neat little stuff, and if you want to analyze data, you can scrape data. Yeah, why don't we move on? Right. It sounds fun. Hopefully, it sounds fun at this point. Hopefully, I've made it sound fun at this point. But how do you go about doing it? There are a number of ways you can do this with varying levels of difficulty, varying levels of complexity, and varying levels of success, right? So, one of the key things that you want to keep in mind while scraping the web is that whichever website you're visiting, more often than not, has some sort of tech in place to identify web scrapers, to track web scraper behavior. So some of these methods may be more complex, but they also hide your tracks far better when you're scraping data off of these websites, right? So if you're looking at the simplest way, I'm going to say no-code tools or low-code tools like na10.io. I believe Harshal was talking about that in a previous stream just a couple of hours ago. na10.io, I'll drop a link in chat. And then there's always Octopus, stuff like that. Those are kind of the simplest ways you can get started. You really don't need to write some code to get started with web scraping. But going one level further, one level of I want to say easiness of getting started with web scraping, you've got tools like Selenium, which essentially emulate a browser and let you interact with it, let you grab data, and also let you interact with the browser. Now, Selenium is incredibly easy to get started with because you really don't need to define what you're looking for. You really don't need to define the headers, or you don't need to try and cover your tracks too much because at the end of the day, you're still uh, you're still interacting with the browser window. It still looks like a user is interacting with it. So that's very easy to get started with, but it's also very inefficient. Now, the best way, in my opinion, that you want to get started with web scraping is learning to make requests directly, learning to emulate, learning to make the website think that you're a web browser, but you're just making some basic HTTP requests. Right? That's kind of what we're going to walk through in this session. So if you want something, go request it. But now you might ask, what is a request? This is actually a nice joke, Riti. I did not see this slide before. Uh, you are most definitely not saying please in requests, but to kind of walk you through what a request is, the entire World Wide Web operates on the basis of these things called requests and responses, right? So let's say you go to your browser and type google.com and you hit enter. What happens then? Your browser makes a request, quote unquote request, to the web server that hosts Google or the set of servers that hosts Google. And while it reaches there, it goes through a couple of points, primarily through your ISP, Internet Service Provider, and through a DNS server to resolve google.com to an IP address. But those are a little out of the scope of this session. So let's just assume that anytime you actually go to a web page or load an asset, load an image, or load a file, or anything like that, your web browser makes a direct request. Your web browser makes a direct request to the server that hosts this asset, right? And this request is basically your computer telling the server, "Hey, look, I want this. If I'm allowed to have it, please send it over to me," right? And if a web server receives a request from a client that is authorized with the right, with the right cookies, with the right passwords or tokens, whatever it is that it's got set up to use, and if you're hitting the right ports in the server, if you're fulfilling a certain set of conditions to kind of validate that you are actually who you are and you're allowed to access this data, the server will send something back called a response. Now, I think this is fairly self-explanatory, but once you make a request, the server validates it and it sends you back a response with a number of different things. Ritvy, I hope you've got status codes in the next slide because that's what I'm going to talk about now. Uh,
I
so
think
it will
they're
send you a
there
number
one
of
side here and there.
Right, wonderful. So it sends you back a status code followed by some information. So the most famous one of all time, 404 not found, is essentially saying you've hit a point on the server that doesn't really connect, uh, that doesn't really have anything. So it's an error from the client side. You're requesting something that does not exist, right? So that's the server telling you, look, dude, I really don't have anything here. Maybe you should be looking at a different point in the server. But there are other status codes as well, as this picture shows you. As this picture shows you, if your status code starts with a one and is followed by two other digits, it's informational. So this is when the server tells you, "Oh, you're looking in the right spot," and then points you to a different place or stuff like that. Now, 2xx is success, essentially saying, "Okay, you're authorized to do this, and I have the information that you're requesting. So here's a 200 status code along with the data that you requested." And the third kind, of course, 3xx. These slides are so good. Rithi, I mean, all of the credit is yours. Uh,
Thank you.
enough hogging the spotlight. So a status code of 3xx basically tells you that the resource that you're requesting is moved to a different location, and it points you there. So essentially a redirect. I mean, if you've ever gone to a web page and it's redirected you to a different web page, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, right? 4xx, like I just explained, is a client error. And if the status code that you receive starts with a 5, it means that the server messed up. Nothing wrong with you. You've probably requested the right stuff, but the server is just not in a position to respond. Maybe it's down, maybe it's undergoing maintenance. Um, Maybe it's just not able to find what you asked for. But if you get a 5xx, you're in the clear. It's a server that's messing up, right? So let's kind of move on to the next point now that we kind of understand what requests and responses are, hopefully. Also, at any point of time, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in chat. Rithi and I are here to answer them. That's kind of our job here. Um, but yeah, this is the workflow of a web scraping software. It essentially goes and makes these requests instead of your browser, and it gets data, and then it gives it to you in a format that you can understand, a structured format. Usually, it's in the form of a database, a spreadsheet, a JSON, a CSV, or if you're feeling really hacky, a text file. That's kind of how I got started. Would not recommend, but it's a viable source of data. But yeah, moving on. Yeah, challenges. Now that we kind of know what scraping is, why we would want to scrape something, and the basic methods that we would use to scrape a website. Well, there are some challenges. You should have seen this coming, honestly. Whatever you do, something is going to go wrong. Take these live streams, for example, right? If it goes right, it's probably not an MLS live stream. But there are going to be challenges because most of these websites don't like having scrapers on them, right? Because sometimes they just don't want people accessing the information at a very large scale. They don't want you harvesting their data, which is a very valid concern, which is why they have files like robots.txt. Now, if any of you have participated in USAF cybersecurity challenges, spoiler alert, the first challenge essentially revolves around robots.txt. And what this file does is it tells any web scraper or web crawler the URLs that it's allowed to access and the URLs that it's not allowed to. So it's basically a plea for request. Please don't access this point. We don't want this to be indexed. We don't want random people to be accessing this endpoint. So maybe don't, right? But if the website that you're trying to scrape really does not like you, it's going to introduce a captcha. And at this point, there's really not much way to get out of this. If you've ever encountered a captcha, you know that captchas essentially accuse you of being robots, right? And you might have wondered exactly what makes you think it's a robot. What makes it think that you're a robot? My bad. It's cut me some slack. It's 2 a.m. I've lost my ability to English. Um, but you might have wondered why it thinks you're a robot. It's because of people like me that are scraping the internet uh, and essentially exploiting this, that websites sometimes think that you might be one of those scrapers, right? So there's going to be a bunch of challenges. Sometimes you might want to scrape. Um, wait, that's a fairly hard take. I prefer age capture, honestly. It might be a little bit more, it's honestly just as difficult to scrape. So, as a web scraper, I really don't care. But from a data gathering point of view, age capture, if you do the research, is far more ethical in the way um, it trains its models behind the scenes, right? If you take a look at what reCAPTCHA does, it tracks all of the movements that you do on the server on the web page to make sure that you're not a scraper. And on top of that, it makes you select which it makes you identify images that it later uses for training itself, right? And I don't know about you personally, I don't like that. I don't think that's very ethical. Um, and for that sole reason, I prefer seeing age captures in websites. But yeah, so if you hit a captcha, it means the company does not want you to be scraping it. And in general, it's better. I would recommend that you look at exactly how public the information that you're scraping is, and that you stick to all the legal guidelines that your uh, government issues for scraping the web. Um, so yeah, those are some of the challenges that you'll find. Those are challenges provided by the websites that you're scraping. Now it's another entirely different issue that you might not be able to find the right information that you need to request the right authorization that you need to request the data that you're asking for, and that's kind of on you to do some trial and error to figure out those. You will see when I miserably fail to scrape a website 10 minutes down the line. So yeah,
So just a quick question, Shikaran. I'm just wondering,
please.
okay, I'm as new to this entire topic as any of you. So when you're scraping the website, that it makes sense that if there's data, it asks for, a captcha. But if I'm signing up for a profile, why bother with the captcha then? I mean, what will a bot scrape there?
Okay, a bot might not necessarily be scraping anything. It could even be web automation. Essentially, you could have it's fairly simple to write a bot that can go ahead and create thousands and thousands of accounts on a website. Um, and that's not really fun when you're sitting on the other end, right? You don't want to build up a service only to get it spammed with requests with accounts, to the point where you're not able to distinguish what is a bot and what is a human, and it's just taking up loads of your resources and racking up your AWS bill like crazy. Not fun. So as a web application, as someone that's written a web application, I wouldn't want that to happen, and that's kind of why I would use a captcha in whatever it is that I build. Right? Does that answer your question?
Yep. I mean, so captcha isn't specifically for web scraping, is what I was trying to
It's
understand.
essentially to make sure that people don't exploit websites.
Makes
That's
sense.
kind of where it comes from. So yeah, so now that we've gone over some of the challenges, what do we have in store next? I honestly don't know what half of these slides have because we just wrapped up maybe 20 minutes ago, right? Uh, yeah, so now that we've gone through some of the very, very, very basics of web scraping, what it is and what how we should go about it, let's try and come up with a problem that we can solve. I'm here to crowdsource suggestions to kind of find something to build on stream today. So, do we have anything that we'd like to build? If you have any ideas, shoot it at me in chat. Rithvi will be kind enough to point it out.
Experienced people
Anything,
here.
honestly. Why do you think? What would you use web scraping for? As long as it's simple enough, I'm happy to build it up. Scrape Google. That's a tad more difficult than you make it sound, my friend. But sure, it is doable. Why would you want to scrape Google? I'm looking for a problem here to solve, right? No, genuinely, give me a problem that you think can be solved with web. Yes, you can scrape IRCDC, which is actually a really, really wonderful use case to kind of find out. I just realized I need to give everyone some context. IRCTC is the Indian Rail CTC website. I don't know what CTC stands for there, but it's essentially the Indian Railways. Um, and honestly, I can think of a few good use cases for scraping IRCTC websites off the bat. Maybe you want to find out whether a train is going to be delayed. Maybe you want to find out whether there's free seats left in a train before you actually go and book it. Maybe you want to do some web automation to book seats for you automatically. So really nice ideas, uh, but keep them coming, folks. Scrape tweets again. So a lot of these websites actually give you the APIs that you need to access their data, and these APIs usually come with the restrictions that the companies need to keep in place for from to prevent people from misusing their data. Right? Twitter is one such example. Twitter has a pretty decently structured API through which you can get most of the information that you want. So web scraping is really something that you should resort to when you're not able to find an API for something, and when you're not able to get it done easily enough, right? Someone says they scraped Yiffy. I feel like I've heard of the name Yiffy before, but it doesn't really ring a bell.
All right, some great suggestions. It's okay if you want to, suggest some crazier ideas.
It's funny that you say that way because that was one of my hackathon projects that won a prize at an FPH. So it was called HackCal, and the idea was I just missed out way too many MLH events, way too many cybersecurity challenges, till it got to a point where I got sick of it, and I built something that would scrape the MLH first party events website, mlh.io/events, and grab all the data of when an event is going to start, when it's going to end, where I can go to access maybe the dev post link, stuff like that. I don't know if it's still up, if the website is still up, but you can definitely find the project on my dev post.
All right, those are some
Speaking
great suggestions.
scraping MLH events, maybe let's do something local hack day themed. I feel
That
like that
sounds
would
good.
be yeah. Prithvi, when I told you to act like this, you were supposed to be natural about it, not
No, no,
completely
I was
fake.
no, I was about to suggest that like this event was a last minute edition, right? I mean, it got
Yeah.
even though it was scheduled, like we decided yesterday, it was scheduled like literally 20-30 minutes before the event. So maybe that's that's where this could really come in handy. I that was supposed to be natural. Oh my god.
Yeah. You really have a career in engineering, maybe not so much in acting. Scrape all DevPost projects from local hack they build. Now, Way, my friend, I have tried to scrape DevPost, and trust me, they do not like it. They do not enjoy people scraping their website. Um and just out of a sense of respect, I'm going to stay away from it for now. But yeah, again, a very valid use case. If maybe you were a partner with a hackathon website that wasn't really giving you all of the tools that DevPost does, because I know DevPost was incredibly helpful in providing all of the data that I needed when I was actually organizing hackathons, right? Maybe you're working with a platform that doesn't really do that, and you want to compile all the projects into a spreadsheet. Um, compile all of the projects into a spreadsheet so that you can easily pass it on to judges to get the projects judged. In that case, it would be a really, really cool idea to go scrape whatever it is that you're using. Someone's asking for my profile links. Thank you, my friend. You've just made my day. I am more than happy to plug my Twitter. But let's see.
Do you want me to share your GitHub?
I've got all of the links on my website, streetrn.com.
I'll share it so that it goes on all the platforms.
Sounds good. Thank you. So streetrn.com, firstname.com. I'm pretty proud of getting that domain name. But yeah, that should contain most of my links. If any of it is broken, please feel free to DM me on Twitter. You should probably follow me there as well. Now, before I get kicked out of stream for too much self-promotion, let's kind of go through the local hack day website. Don't worry, we got this approved beforehand. We did not want to scrape the website without getting consent from the people that actually built and host it. And this is something that I recommend you do in most cases, right? So let's take a look at the local hack day website and see if there's anything we can gain from it. Let me share my screen here. Share screen. I'm going to do a single window for now. So so to summarize the problem that we're trying to solve here again, every morning maybe you want an itinerary, for lack of a better word, of what challenges you've got that day. Oh God. Of the challenges that you've got that day and what you want to do, what you want to get done by the end of the day, right? I know that when I used to do local hack table, it used to be a huge pain to keep track of all of the challenges that were going on at any point of time, and this would have been a godsend at that point of time, right? So I believe it is local hack. I know hackp.ac/with3 will get me to the right place. So there we go. All right, that is the official local hack day website. Right, here we go. We've got local hack day build. Got a list of sponsors. What a local hack day build. I'm going to be honest here. I haven't really been doing anything this build season except for hopping on stream to annoy MLHs and maybe add some value. I'm not really sure if I did any of that, but hopping on stream. That's kind of all that I did this LHD. Challenges. Okay, we've got something decent here. Looks like let's go into DevTools super quickly and see if we can find something interesting.
So how did you access the DevTools?
So you press, there's a number of ways you can do this. Right click and inspect is one way, or you could press F12, or you could do Control Shift I, or Command Shift I if you're on Mac. So DevTools essentially exposes all of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and in some cases the files that a website is rendering, and it's a nice little window into exactly what is going on behind the scenes. Now I'm going to try and figure out a pattern here for how this data is stored, right? So we have card frame, and inside each card frame div object, we've got an H3, which is essentially the title. We've got some rich text, which contains a paragraph tag inside which we have all of this stuff. Right, seems fairly straightforward. Now, Ritvi, I don't have StreamYard open on another monitor, so I'm gonna rely on you to tell me if there are any questions that I need to attend to.
Oh, no, no, there are no
Uh,
questions, but there's a really cute poem someone has put for people in IST. It goes, roses are red, violets are blue, IST, going like, sleep, where are you?
Sleep, where are you? Nice. I mean, at this point, it feels like for the last 3 years, I've just been living on Eastern time. You probably won't see me awake during the day at all. Not something I recommend, but it's just what I do. All right. So I'm getting a decent sense for how this web page is structured. Looks like we've got a bunch of stuff here that I'm just going to ignore. You'll see why later on. I'm going to ignore all of this, and I'm going to once I point to each and every single one of these elements. This little thing here that has a cursor on it will let you select an element in the page to inspect the HTML for that element, right? So it looks like each one of these challenges to get done are stored in divs with class name card frame with h3 with an h3 inside with the title, and they've got a paragraph tag containing all of this text. Now let me just make sure that is a pattern and that's not just a one-off. If you take a look at this, again, card frame upper, inside of which there's a card frame h3, update your address. I'm gonna be honest here, I've not done any of these challenges. Maybe I should, if I want any of the LHT swag. Um, but we've got some more text here. Looks like it follows a pattern. Now, we've got a bunch of these at any given point of time. Oh, and this is really convenient. If you look at the top here, you've got registration challenges, you've got daily challenges, and you've got week-long challenges. Right. That's a nice little UI element that. Ah, okay. This is genuinely the first time I'm looking at this, and this is definitely far more full featured than last year. This is nice. Now I can already predict here that this might cause us some trouble because when I actually load this web page, I cannot read all of these beginner challenges, all of these sponsor challenges and stuff like that. Does that make sense to you, Ritvik? Why I might
Yep,
have trouble scraping these?
yep. So I'm wondering though, so how would it be different from something that's loaded all at once? I mean, it is a pretty static website, right? Or is it not?
It is a pretty static website, but we're clearly doing something to hide and show some of these elements here. And when we're hiding these, I'm afraid that we might be introducing some more, some more, what do we call it? Some more attributes to this, which might affect the way that I scrape, which you'll see in a second here, right? Now, let me just grab one of these to see what happens when I switch over. Okay, looks like it's still there. It's just hidden, right? That's a good thing. Um, so yeah, it might not be actually as difficult as I thought it would. All right, it might be time for us to start writing some code. What I'm going to be using today here is Python. I'm going to be using two libraries with Python, which are requests, which basically let you make these HTTP requests that I just spoke about. And the other library that I'm going to be using is called Beautiful Soup 4. Both of these are very common libraries when it comes to scraping the web. Requests. There we go. Project requests. HTTP for humans. And this will let me actually request the information from websites without having a browser do all of the work for me. And once I get the HTML that's running this behind the scenes, I should be able to use Beautiful Soup 4 to kind of parse it and make some sense and identify different elements, identify different patterns, and just kind of get started with it, right? All right,
All right, folks. I'm
let me start
sending the
sharing.
links in the chat so that you follow along.
Oh, let me send it to you in the internal chat with you,
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
that
So I've
should.
sent the first one, and the rest of it.
I don't know whether I want to. Yeah.
All right. So now you guys have access to both the links, and I'll be following along as well. So if there are any errors, we all can sort it out together. There's a great question.
Sanket, what a mad lad.
Yeah.
This can be done with n8n.io. I don't have too much experience working with it. I know Harshal does have a significant amount of has a significant amount of time put into it. But yes, you can use n8n.io. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but you can use n8n.io to make HTTP requests, get data, parse it, all without writing a single line of code. Um, quickly looking up the pronunciation for N8N. Okay, it's pronounced N8N. Okay, good. Uh, I mean, I'm happy to plug it. Genuinely, it's a really nice service, and I have no doubt that if I was starting afresh, I would enjoy the flexibility that it gives me and the convenience that it gives me without having to write any code. Some sites have a labeling structure that is as straightforward as uni physics. Yes. And this is kind of where it's not a bug, it's a feature kicks in. While the code is incredibly messy and makes it unbelievably difficult for people to read it, I guess the one advantage is that it makes it difficult for web scrapers to read it as well, right? I see some other interesting chats as well. I forgot I had F12 bonded to airplane mode. Welcome back, Sanket. Generally, when that happens, I think you just need to hit the function key and then F12. I've had that happen to me way too many times as well.
Which I think is a
So
disclaimer that please check your shortcuts before following a tutorial.
yes, yes. Do we have any other chats? HTTP for humans. That's a really nice tagline, and I really like that from requests. But yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen again. This time, my entire screen, so you can actually see what I'm doing. Rithvi, do you want to pull it up?
Yep.
Alrighty. Oh god, that is not something I want to show off. That is not something I want to show off either. Alright, you get to take a look at my beautiful wallpaper. Love this to bits. But coming back to the thing at hand, let me cd into my. This is where I store all of my projects. Let me LHB scraping. Right. Wonderful. I was kind of scared that that wouldn't work because it's been a while since I've worked with terminal commands on Windows, but I'm glad it did. All right, cd lsd scraping code dot. Now what I did was I made a new folder called LHD scraping in the folder that I used to store all of my projects, and then I just used the code dot command to open that in VS Code. Right? Quick life hack if you didn't know already. This makes your life so much easier. But yeah, let me open up a terminal here as well. Now, this is kind of when, also, by the way, if any of you folks are following along, please let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, because following along is definitely very fun. If you want to do that, let me know. I can go slower if you need to.
Also, I'm
Right.
posting every command that he uses in the chat side by side, so you should be good to follow along any command in case you miss out.
Thank you. Yeah. Wonderful. Atul looks like Atul is following. All right. So first things first, let me zoom in to make sure that it's visible. Is this does this look good? Too small? Too big? What do you folks think?
Just a second. It is good enough. What I am going to do is I'm going to remove me from the stream so that there's as little block as possible.
Feel free to remove me from the stream as well. That reduces my stress by a large factor.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
both of our images are hiding the terminal right now, which is something we definitely don't want. Makes sense to kind of get it out of the way.
did it get it out of the way?
I'm looking at the stream. Let's see. It does look like it, and now we've got an infinity mirror. But okay, yeah, looks like it's moved it out. Now this
Huh.
is kind of the point where you want to make sure you have Python installed. So let me just walk you through that as well, super quickly. Python.org.
Why could you please help me out with that?
I will give you the links if you don't worry about it. Python.org/downloads. You go download Python here, which I've already done hundreds and hundreds of times. So I'm just going to let it be. Once you download, you can walk through the installation. It's got a pretty decent wizard. Once you're done, you can get back here. Now, if there's someone here that hasn't downloaded Python yet, that doesn't have Python set up, please let us know. We're happy to kind of kick back and relax until you get that done.
Also, while people are trying to reach the same point, any thoughts on using in virtual environments when using Python? I mean, I've had some terrible experience without virtual environments, so I usually always
Without
suggest
or with.
without virtual environments, I end up screwing a lot of things always. So
Here's the
yeah,
thing:
I
when that comes into the picture, I usually go to another extreme, and I just deploy everything in a Docker container so that nothing ever interacts with anything.
so
I have not really had good experiences with virtual environments, and I genuinely do not enjoy using them. But that's just a personal preference. Basically, everybody else on the internet says that using virtual environments is a good idea. So maybe do your own research, figure out whether that's something you want to do. But do we want to explain what a virtual environment is first?
that's a great
Maybe,
idea. So
yeah.
I personally, again, I absolutely love using Anaconda Navigator for creating my virtual environments because that
Oh God,
that
no,
way
no,
I can
no. I detest Anaconda with a passion. God,
So
no,
the
it
thing
messes with
is,
my dependencies so much. It becomes a
really,
huge pain. Yeah, it
really,
messes so much with my dependencies. Yes.
I've had the opposite experience. So my pandas and NumPy just wouldn't work on my base Python. So it turned out it was a Windows error. Almost every other Windows user had that. So that's why I had to switch to Anaconda because that way I could at least. I mean, I'm open to suggestions on trying something different. I know Docker takes up a lot of RAM when I'm using it if I'm using multiple
It
things. So
does,
I
which is
avoid.
where I think it's lucky that I have a server running at home. But no, seriously, I just enjoy using Docker containers far more than virtual environments. I don't know if any of you in the chat are going to be judging me for it. Let me just take a look. Yeah, people struggle with virtual environments at the fellowship, but it's necessary. Ritu, you brought my face back on stream without asking me out.
That was because we were talking and people were following along, and it's
Fair enough.
when you start doing this,
Yeah,
remove you.
but no, sorry, I don't know how to do it. To be honest, I just thought it might be an option. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I think Wei is talking about StreamYard. Um, all right. People struggle with virtual environments at the fellowship. Well, yeah, it's just. I mean, if you can find a better solution that works for you, honestly, just pick that. Yeah, that's an extreme, but it makes things so much easier. And if you're just trying to build, which is kind of my goal whenever I'm getting started with a project, I just want the simplest setup possible, right? So that works for me. I'm more about building products than about good engineering. So yeah. So has everyone come up to speed with where we are so far? Have you downloaded Python? Are you done with all of that?
I'm not in a brief. Okay, that's a good
Can you
question.
please
Like,
explain DevRel in brief? It's a good question that I'm not going to go down right now. Honestly, I've done this in so many Twitter spaces, and I'm happy to do far more going forward. And maybe if I can pull the right strings, I can come on to another stream and talk about this. But my throat is starting to hurt a lot right now, so I'm going to stay away from DevRel. If I start talking, I'm probably not going to stop for a while. But yeah, looks like we've got basically everyone up and running. I don't see anyone who wants us to wait for them. So yeah, once we're done setting up Python, Prithvi, maybe you want to get our faces out of the way for this.
Done.
Done?
Yep.
Wonderful. So Python has its own package manager called pip. Pip stands for Python. Pip installs Python, right? It's a, I don't know exactly, I don't know the term for it, but it's like GNU, right? GNU, not Unix. Yeah, so this is your package manager. If you want to install a library, this is generally the way to go. Pip install. You want to do beautiful for requests comes prepackaged with Python, I think. I'm not 100% sure about that. Let me just do it as a sanity check. Okay, so yeah, request does not come default with Python. Today I learned. But yeah, so if you execute these two commands, you should be ready to go. I'm just gonna paste it in Twitch chat because I don't want to expose the internal chat with me. But yes, please copy paste and code on the other platforms as well.
Okay.
Once you're
I
done
will.
installing these two packages, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to start a new file. Let's call it main.py. I am a boring person. But yeah, that's should have created it, which is a little weird. There we go. Main.py. We're going to import both requests. Now, if you notice that I'm getting autocomplete suggestions here, that's because I turned on Copilot for the stream because it's just so much easier to work with it and not make mistakes when you're on stream demonstrating simple problems. Whether or not you want to use Copilot is up to you entirely. I find that the more I use Copilot, the less uh, adept I become at problem solving. So I try to avoid it as much as possible when I'm writing production level code. And also, if you're using it at work, make sure that you get it approved if you're working for a company, because a lot of the times the privacy policy may not be in line with your company's policies. Yeah.
I think Copilot isn't available to everyone, right? It's still in a beta testing,
I don't
right?
know. I got Copilot a long time ago.
Because I recently tried to sign up and I think it was still in beta, or it wasn't letting you
It's
sign
still
up.
in technical preview. Yeah,
Ultimate
it's still in
preview,
technical preview.
exactly.
Sign up. I already have Copilot, so I don't know why. Yeah, already enabled. I mean, it's definitely a cool little tool to check out. So I definitely recommend that you check it out, but just be careful with it. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, I'm just going to keep the documentation open because I'm going to need it at some point. It's just good to have it as a reference. I'm going to keep the website that I'm scraping open in another tab, which is also very important because I'm going to keep referring back to this. I think I can close this PPT. I don't need it anymore. And yeah, do we have any questions? Everyone gangster till you type reverse SHA 256 in Copilot. I don't think Copilot is at a point where it can do that yet, but maybe soon enough. But has everybody followed along till now? Is everyone clear about what we're doing here? Has everyone installed the required packages, imported them?
Yep, I'm on the same page. If anyone wants us to wait or
Wonderful.
clarify something, we're happy to wait for you.
Okay, I'm going to assume that people have gone forward. Ritvy, tell me if someone needs us to wait. But now I'm going to start writing comments for two reasons, right? One is, of course, it's always good to document your code. And the second is, Copilot works so much better when you actually comment what you're trying to do, right? So I'm just going to, for the sake of my own sanity, I'm going to use the URL to scrape. I am going to feed the hard code this for now. Right? localhackday.mlx.io/challenges. No questions. Okay. So looks like I can start explaining exactly how we're going to scrape this. Now, first off, we want to make sure that we request the web page and get the HTML. So how you do that is you define the URL right now. The method to use is response equals requests dot get URL. Now, there's a bunch of things that you can do here with stuff like headers and user agent and all of that stuff, all of that good stuff. Now, let me walk you through what a user agent is, because it's pretty important when you actually start scraping websites that don't want you to scrape them. When you start scraping websites that generally have much more mechanisms set up that can detect robots far more easily. A user agent is essentially let's call it an identifier for your web browser. It's a profile of your web browser. It talks about the engine that you're using, the browser engine that you're using, whether it's Mozilla, whether it's Chromium, whether it's something else entirely. I don't really think there's anything else that's majorly used. It also is going to talk about the version of the browser that you're using. It's think of it like a fingerprint for your browser, right? And that kind of tells most websites, it makes most websites think that you're actually approaching it from uh, a browser when in fact you're just sending a request through the terminal to get it. Right. So we're going to do, I'm going to skip headers for now because Prithvi, you've spoken about this to Mary, and I don't really care if they detect that I'm scraping it. So
Yep.
first things first, I've done this. Let's see what we get as an output. Print. Let's see. We run this. We get response 200. Now, if you remember the status codes that I spoke about, it feels like half an hour ago. 200 essentially says everything's cool. We have the data that you're requesting, and you're allowed to request it. Here's the data. Now, apart from the response code 200, it's going to send me the data in the form of text or content. So let's say if I try to access the text content here, you'll see what happens in a second. If you notice, this looks pretty familiar. Card frame upper, we just saw this card frame, H3. Build your very own fitness tracker using MATLAB. Now, if I remember correctly, let me do a page search. Yep, these are the challenges. We've successfully retrieved the HTML for this web page, and it's time for us to parse and identify patterns in this HTML with which we can identify exactly what it is that we're going to be finding, right? Is everyone following along till now? I know this can sometimes get to be a little too much in one session, so please let me know if you want me to slow down. Rithvi, are you okay till now? Everything good?
I just finished writing my code, so I'm going to try and run it myself, and I think people
Okay.
can try the codes until then as well. What I will
Do you
also
want to
do
share
is
your
I'll
screen? If you want to
sure,
do that, I can go grab some water in a second and be back.
you do that, and by the time I'll also post the code in the chat. So in case people want to pick it up or
Awesome.
something.
I'm going to stop my camera for a second.
Also,
And
before you go, just have a look at the code that I've posted in the chat.
oh,
Of
please,
course,
sure.
please be
Yeah.
mindful of the indentation because it's Python and I can't indent it in the chat. But
Where have you? Okay, yeah. To preserve indentation, funny story. I have a friend that came up with a crazy way to transmit code. What I thought initially was very crazy, but then turned out to be incredibly practical. What he does is anytime he wants to send code over some chat or something like that, and he wants to preserve indentation, when he wants to make sure that the code is not tampered with, he essentially encodes the code into base 64 and then when he sends it over, when you receive it, you decode the base64 and you get it completely intact. But import requests from BS4 import beautiful soup, um, you don't need to write those comments unless you actually really want to, but that's completely up to you. URL equals local update or emulates.io/challenges. Yeah, this is perfect. This is exactly what we want to do. Now I'm gonna go grab some water, let people catch up to this, and ask any questions if they have. Now excuse me for a second.
All right, so this is a good time for you guys to ask any questions, throw in any other comments, or if you want the pace to be slower, faster. Thanks, bye. I didn't realize I wasn't pronouncing your name right before this. Apologies for that. All right, so any other comments, anything you want us to show you in particular, any of the terms that we use that you want acquainted with and you would like us to walk you over. For example, I realized we didn't really tell you what a virtual environment is, even though we started to. So, in case you aren't familiar, virtual environments are basically, think of them like boxes in your computer, and they kind of keep your dependencies constrained to that box. So if your entire environment is shared, your all your OS is shared, but that particular language, particular dependencies stay in that box. So for example, like I was saying, right, I was trying to use NumPy and Pandas, and my base wouldn't let me install it. So initially I got it just to get NumPy and Pandas running. Ironically, I had to use something else for my project in the end, but I ended up really liking the idea of virtual environments. And what it does is, so let's say one project of yours uses so let's say one project of yours uses some version of a Python dependencies, and the other project uses other. If you switch between them on the same base, there's a very high chance you might end up crashing one of the projects or breaking one of the projects. So a virtual environment will make sure that, let's say if you want one version of Python running in one box, that's how it stays. So I have shared my Anaconda screen and how you really work with different environments, because I like Anaconda. Personally, I work a lot with serial. I What I do with my Python is basically, if I have an Arduino and I'm putting something on serial and I want a nice UI to kind of just arrange it, I use Python there. I've used it there, so I want the serial to be interfaced, which is why I don't think Docker might be the right solution for me. I've never really explored it much on that front, but yeah, sure, Yamini. So. I can share my profile too. You can so if you see my name, that's my Twitter profile. You can connect with me there, or just my name on LinkedIn, and you should be good to go. I honestly do not know, so I'm gonna wait for Srikaran to come back and answer this. But if Vai knows one of the answer, I'm happy to let him answer as well. Also, if he wants to come on screen, Vai, you're more than welcome on the stream. All right. Till the time Shikaran comes back to answer this question, are there any other comments, questions that I can take, or you want to talk to me about? I think Shikaran's back.
Yep. Sorry to make you wait. Let me turn on my camera.
All right. So Shikaran, there's a great question for you on the screen.
Mhm. Um, yes, you can. You definitely can. I'm trying to think of a website that I can use to demonstrate this very quickly and very effectively. What would be legal to do right now? Mm, do we have anything here that makes it easy for us to do this? Trying to think. Rithi, you have any suggestions? Simple websites that you can log into um, and demonstrate without really causing too many issues. Yeah, that's generally what you do. Uh, I
I'm
recently did
thinking.
this for a project as well, but it's with a website that I really cannot talk about. That makes it difficult. GitHub, yeah, sure, except I don't want to reveal my GitHub credentials on
How
stream.
about
That
how
wouldn't be
about
very fun.
how about something like Figma? Will that be too difficult? Because will you be really accessing anything using a credential?
I mean, if you want to show a login, okay, let me try to explain how this would work first. Like Wei said, first of all, there's probably going to be a cookie involved. So generally, process of when you go through the process of actually logging into a web page, there's a couple of things that you do. Let me just stop sharing my screen since I'm just going to be explaining. There's a couple of things that you would do. First off, you would make a GET request. I failed to cover I didn't cover the different kinds of requests initially when we were explaining because I really did not expect us to get to that part. But there are a couple of different types of requests: GET requests and POST requests. There are more, but definitely out of the scope of this stream, right? So GET requests, like the name suggests, they're trying to do is get some information from a web server to a client. Whereas POST requests do the opposite. You're essentially sending over a bunch of data from your client to any given server. Now, whenever you log into, let's say Twitter, for example, right? What's your workflow in the browser? You go to https://twitter.com, and what that is essentially a GET request that goes and requests the set of servers that Twitter uses. Listen, hey, I want the homepage of Twitter. I want the sign-in page of Twitter, and just give me that so that I can log in. Right? You do that, and then once you get that web page, there could be something that comes along with it called a cookie, which essentially sets a session for you. This is how websites track you as well. Um, a cookie is, how do I put this very simply? Let's just say a cookie is a piece of identification that you need to use with any request that you make after a point to kind of identify that, hey, look, this is me. With the first GET request that you make, it'll send you a cookie. And after that, if you want to log in, you got to send the cookie back to the server itself. And it'll read the cookie and then realize that, oh, hey, this is the same person that kind of messaged me a while back and asked me for the initial Twitter web page, right? And yeah, since it's the same person and they're making the same request, this has got to be legit. That just helps them keep track of. It also helps them keep track of how you go through a flow, because any request that you make, you'll be sending the cookie along after that point. Now, the easiest way to go about this is when you do make a request, you open up the networks tab, and let me, Prithvi, do you think it would be okay to bring up an anime website on stream?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good to go.
Okay. It doesn't really have credentials, but we won't really be making a post request there as well. It doesn't make sense. Um, Sorry, probably should have been prepared for this, but this was a last minute. And yes, Sunil, please go ahead and ask your question. I'll get to it as soon as I'm done with this. Mm,
Also, Atul, how are you running your script? Are you using Python your script or Python 3 your script? There, that might cause that error that's coming.
and if you're on a Mac or if you're on Linux, you may need to specify pip3 install instead of pip install. So that's another source where you could probably be going wrong.
So I
Yeah,
just
the error
tried.
that you're receiving is module not found, which is essentially saying, look, you're trying to import something, but I really don't have it. I don't know what you're looking for. That's what the code is telling you, right? Yeah. So when you're running it instead of Python main.py, so Way has an interesting message. Another way is using a headless browser, basically a browser controlled by code. The code can open up a browser window, mimic user behavior to put in username and password, log in, then go to the URL containing the data you need to scrape. It is far more resource intensive, and I would only suggest using this as a last ditch alternative. And this is kind of why what I brought up in the beginning of the stream as well. The most common service that helps you do this, or the most common tool that helps you do this, is Selenium. It's an incredibly fun tool to use, and it helps you get a lot of neat little web automation stuff done. But the thing is, like Wei mentioned, it's very resource intensive, and there is just no way you're going to be able to scale your project up to maybe even tens or hundreds of thousands of requests at a second, or tens of hundreds of or thousands of clients handling at the same second if you use Selenium, right? Uh,
So just a heads up, folks. We will have to wind down in the next 10-15 minutes. So the next stream is also ours. So it's gonna be me and Shikran babbling about stuff. But we'll have to wind down this session. But we can eat into the other session for like 15 minutes. So we will
okay,
try
that
and
sounds
cover
good.
things. We'll try and cover things as soon as possible.
Okay, let me just walk you through how the requests look and how I would do this without actually going into trying and logging into a website, because I'm not prepared to do that without actually kind of showing off uh, or accidentally revealing my credentials, right? Not fun, but yeah. Share screen.
Just before you continue, I'm going to address something. So, Sunil, that's a great question, and I'm sure our fellowship team will be more than happy to take your question in the Discord in our fellowship question section. And I think Vi here would be much better suited to direct you there.
Fun fact, way here, way why? Please correct the way I'm pronouncing your name.
Exactly,
Uh,
I was about to
I've
ask
just
for
been
that.
going with one thing, Ritvi's just been going with another. Please fix that. But our friend here works with the fellowship, so they'd be far more, well prepared to answer your questions. Wait, yes. So I was right.
All right. Not that it was ever a competition, but
Right. Let me share my screen. What a mood. But yeah, another website, one that I visit very often. But I'm back in the developer tools after loading the website, and let's head over to the network tab. The network tab basically gives you a log of every single request that your web browser makes to any given server. And this is an incredibly useful tool when you're web scraping, because you can find, you can identify, and you can use this to actually copy and replicate the exact same requests that your browser is making. And I can show off the headers that I was talking about a couple of seconds ago with this. Let me just refresh so that we see exactly what's going on. So this is the main HTML that this request basically covers that. My internet is playing games with me, so it's not really loading very quickly, but we can still take a look at the request headers, right? So authority, this basically tells you who it is that you're requesting from. Method get, okay, that was unexpected, but yes. Method get status code 200, remote address. Is this my IP or is this the server's IP? I'm not 100% sure about that. But scheme, you're using HTTPS. Path. Now, if I want to say search for, let's say, conf.pec/ritv, I don't know why I would do that, but hypothetical situation, let's say I do that, and it actually goes through. They actually have a path called ritvi on their server, which again would be very weird. But let's again hypothetical situation that actually happens. The path here would be listed as /ritvi, right? Scheme HTTPS, self-explanatory. That's the protocol that we're using. Except text HTML, right? This is essentially saying, look, this is the different kinds of stuff that I'm willing to accept as a response. So it has to be one of these things, right? It's essentially a validation. We're going to skip a lot of these headers. This is what I was talking about, user agent. This is essentially a fingerprint for your browser. It tells you that I'm using one of these three things, one of these four things. Chrome 97.0.46, which I have no doubt is the version of Chrome that I'm using. What is my browser? There you go, Chrome 97, right? So that is kind of like a fingerprint for your web browser. But here we can do a couple of interesting things, right? we see a lot of other requests being made. This is essentially, this requests the HTML, and when you request the HTML, in the HTML, you usually have links, and I just hit Control U to view source and stuff like this. You have links to the CSS, right? Whenever you build a web page, you leave links to the CSS, the JavaScript that you use. When you make that request to the main web page, it also creates simultaneous separate requests to all of the stuff that you've linked here, all of the resources that you've linked here. So that's kind of what you're seeing here in all of these different files. This is an SVG, there's a PNG for the button, right? There you go. It's the contributor collective button. I'm sure if I scroll down, it'll be there somewhere. Now, let's say you want to replicate one of these requests. Let's say you want to make a request very, very quickly from your browser. From your program or from your terminal. What you do is you pick the request that you want to replicate, and you right-click it. And if you come down to this, you're going to be able to see copy as PowerShell fetch, Node.js fetch, curl in command or bash. Let's say, just to humor you, I'm going to copy as curl, right? And this is the curl request. Curl is a command line tool that lets you request web pages, lets you request assets on the web. And this curl command basically defines all of the headers that we just saw. What website are you requesting, authority, cache control, user agent, accept, everything that we just saw, right? And this tool is basically something that just lets me convert this to a Python request without too much trouble. And yeah, this is something that I use pretty commonly, right? So yeah, if you had, let's say you had a text field here for username and then another text field for password, and you entered it. Once you hit the submit button, you'll see a post request going out, right? It'll appear on the same tab, and you can copy that request essentially, and that will contain all of the data that you need to replicate that request. And once you've got that, you can convert it to whatever language it is that you're using. Once you've done that, you can comfortably use that with your code. Does that make sense? Rithi, did I make any sense, or was I blabbering?
Well, you made a lot of sense. Just wondering, what's the difference between the different commands that you showed, like curl and everything? I mean, what are they essentially doing?
Okay, curl is one command. What else are we talking about?
So the drop down that you showed, and there were
right.
commands.
Copy as PowerShell. I have not used copy as PowerShell, but let's take a look at that. But if you ever worked with Node.js, you know that Node.js has an inbuilt fetch library, fetch API that will let you basically fetch the data in any URL. You can copy the code directly from here. It's just a convenient way of doing that. Let me just open Notepad just to paste this and show you what it looks like. Yeah, you just copy paste this into your Node.js app, and it would fetch the URL and give you all of the data that you just requested, right?
Makes sense. So basically, go ahead.
This is what you would use with PowerShell. So PowerShell scripting, right? That makes sense. PowerShell is not just the kind of shell that you use; it's also a scripting language that Microsoft uses in its terminal, kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like it's very comparable to Bash on Linux, right? So yeah, sorry, Rithi, you were saying?
No, I was just saying that essentially all of them, they're basically doing the same thing. It's just to suit every developer's
Exactly
needs.
the same thing. Yes, precisely.
Okay.
If you get something that you don't really like, you can always I just copied this as copy as fetch, copy as Node.js fetch, right? So I want to convert Node.js fetch to Python request. Stack Overflow, Medium, there's no real tool. Convert curl commands to code. This doesn't let me do it, but I'm sure the Stack Overflow answer will kind of get it covered for us. Look at the documentation. Very valuable advice. Always very valuable advice. But this is just there to make sure that as a developer, you kind of have the tools that you need, and it gives you the request that you need to make, regardless of the stack that you're using.
Makes
Wei
sense.
says Node.js is the best. I highly disagree. I just enjoy working with Python way too much. Node.js is slowly growing on me because I've started using it for work, but it's still nowhere near Python. My tiers goes Python, Golang, and then maybe a tie between Java and JavaScript, Node.js. Feel free to start a fight with about this with me in Discord DMs. You're always welcome to do that. But yeah, so that was kind of how you would, replicate essentially a login or authentication flow through requests. Wonderful. Atul's got it working. Way, Rithvi, thank you. And whoever else responded, thank you so much for helping out. Alrighty, let's go back here. We've got the response.text. We've got the HTML. That's kind of where we left off, right? Right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through Beautiful Soup. Beautiful Soup, think of it like an easy way to interface with HTML files or XML files or anything that you might get from a web server and parse it and grab information from it very, very quickly. You don't need to do string searches uh, within the HTML itself, which would be very inefficient and very inaccurate in most cases. Beautiful Soup kind of takes care of that for you. So what I'm going to do is soup equals Copilot is going to do it for me, but response.text HTML parser. So HTML parser is essentially telling Beautiful Soup that look, I'm dealing with HTML here, so that's the parser that you want to be using. I'm going to delete that print statement. Now that we have this soup object, we can do a lot of different operations on it, right? What we're looking for here is, let's go back to the website and see how it's structured. We've got a card frame, right? Now, another interesting thing that you can do here is, like we just copied a bunch of stuff from the networks tab, we can also copy stuff from the elements, right? Let's say you're trying to find each one of these list items, right? You're trying to find each one of these list items. What you would do is you right click on this and copy XPath. XPath is essentially, call it a pointer to where this particular, what's the word I'm looking for? This particular tag is in the HTML, right? So I'm going to soup dot find element. Yes, soup dot find all div and oh wait, how do you find by XPath? I forgot. Again, this is how my workflow goes normally. I don't remember most of the stuff. I end up Googling my way out of this, right? So I'm going to show you how I go through this. Beautiful Soup 4, how to, sorry, got a mosquito trouble. How to find elements by XPath. Right, can we use XPath with Beautiful Soup 4? Actually, you know what? The documentation might be a better place to look for this. For the index, quick search. Oh, that's interesting. That is very weird. Am I just missing something?
Way is suggesting DOM element. I'm not sure if it helps you.
I mean, that would work very, very well if you're using Node.js, but not necessarily with, you know, not
Python.
necessarily with. Okay. I've just got this confused. Right. Selenium is where you would use find element by XPath. Right. Uh, just to prove that I'm not a complete idiot, I'm going to show you the documentation for Selenium. Um find XPath. Selenium is what Wei and I were talking about a while ago, which is essentially a headless browser that you could use to emulate what you would do with a browser. So driver.find element by XPath is how you would locate an element with that. There you go. Right. Now that's NAFO aside. Uh, in this case, you would just use soup.findAll, which would essentially let you find all of these elements. And what we're looking for is, what are we looking for again? Let's go back to this website. We're looking for list items inside of which we've got card frames. Essentially, all of the data that we need for each of these challenges is within these card frames, right? So that's kind of what we need to be looking at. The div elements with class ID being card frame is kind of what we need to be looking at. And I'm just going to do class equals frame, card frame, wasn't it? Yeah. All right, that should give us. Let's see. This returns. Let me look at the documentation again. There we go. Soup.findAll. Soup.find. I think that should. Right. Wonderful. So here's the example that we need to use to. I should probably zoom in a little bit. Yes. This is exactly what we want to do here. We want to find basically every single div element with the class being card frame. We want to run through each and every single one of those. And for now, let's just say we want to print them to the console. Later on, we can work on building an API with this and then pushing stuff to the front end. So maybe you can even build an entire website using just data that's scraped from local Hackday's website. But for now, let's just print it to the console, right? So I would do something like dash in there we go. This has kind of done most of the work for us. But essentially, what this bit of code does is, first of all, soup.findAll div with class card frame essentially finds every single div element inside the HTML that we just retrieved and searches for every single div element that has class name being card hyphen frame, right? Once we've found all of that, we're going to iterate through it using a for loop here for element in the result of this, right? For each and every single div element with class card frame, we're going to print we're going to find an h3 tag inside this element, and then we're going to print the text that is contained in that tag. And then we're going to print, we're going to find the p tag, and we're going to find the text contained in that tag. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Let me just. Okay, yeah, we're not really getting any messages, so yeah, that's kind of how you just go ahead and print it out. Control Shift 9. There you go. The second time we run. You know what? I'm just going to clear this for the sake of sanity. Run it again. And there you go. If you followed along, if you managed to get this far, we've basically just scraped all of the events that we found here, all of the challenges that we found here, right? So let's start at the beginning. Register for local Hackney build, update your address. These are all of the registration challenges. If you take a look at the daily challenges, learn how to use Twilio and create a Twilio app. We found that. Learn how to use Twilio and create a Twilio app. Let me zoom in again. And if you remember in the beginning, we were a little concerned about how it would treat these week-long challenges, whether it would get all of them or whether it would mess up and miss a couple of these. Now let's see, build your own social media application. Do we have that here? Build your own social media application. There you go. So what this is doing here is when we go to the tab, it's not loading it separately. It just loads everything at one stretch and then hides it on the basis of which tab we've selected. So they've made it significantly easier for us to scrape here. Has everyone followed along to this part? Does it work for you? Do you have any questions about the code that Copilot just wrote?
Or I put the code that was recently added in the chat. If you guys need the earlier code as well, let me know. I'll put the entire thing in the chat. And please be mindful of the indentation, especially now that we were using print statements in the for loop.
yeah, I will also make sure that, let me just do. This is an absolutely useless commit message. Please don't ever write a commit messages like this. But yeah, so for those that haven't really faced the Git workflow, I've initialized a new repository. I've added all of the files and I've committed them. Now I need to make sure that I have a remote repository in which take this repo.new.
All right. Any other questions until then? Comments? Were you following along? Does it make sense? All right. Where's following along?
I am honored. That's all I can say. But yeah, I'm just creating a new remote repository. Sorry, yeah. And going back, let me just copy this URL. I'm going to create a main transfer.
All right. It works for Sanket as well.
Awesome. GitHub add origin. Uh, that should work. There we go. I've successfully pushed the 14 lines of code that we just wrote. And hopefully that helps. Right. Once this is done, I might actually go set up a README, include the slides in this repository itself. But for now, here you go. I copied it anyways, so I'm going to drop it on Twitch. It's
I
actually
already
working,
did.
unlike some of my other code.
I already did.
I feel
So
you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I feel gay here, unlike some of my other code. Yeah, Copilot kind of saved my rump here, but yes. So this is kind of a very, very, very basic solution of how you would go about, doing something like this, web scraping. Right now, I have a couple of other projects that I've already done, web scraping projects that I
now,
don't
before
know.
before we move on to that, I mean, let's just take 1 minute to kind of celebrate. I'm super happy. This was my first web scraping code that worked.
Yay! I'm
Yay,
glad.
indeed.
I'm genuinely glad. Hey, thank you for doing it on Replit way. That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. But I hope with this, I've given the 18 folks that are watching right now a good idea of what it's like to kind of pull data from the web and the kind of things that you can do with web scraping. Honestly, like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, the reason I got into programming in the first place is to solve kind of stupid little problems that I had to automate my life and make it easier for me to be lazy. Web scraping just happened to be a part of every single project that I built that way. So that was really, really cool. And I feel like I'm sharing a part of uh, myself here. And that sounded very cheesy, but still.
I'm just too happy with my code running. I'm sorry, I was completely
Yeah. Ruchi, so did you understand? Did you get something about web scraping or this little session that we had today?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is supposed to be me running a technical stream, but I totally learned something, and I think this is how it should work. There should be someone learning to at least something working.
100%. I mean, for all of the IoT stuff that you taught me in the last three streams, I think this is the least I could do to give back to you. So yeah, happy I could help. I genuinely hope all of you were able to pick something up from the streams as well. I'm just searching for some of these projects, hoping that I have them public.
So I'm
Let's see.
not sharing a screen right now, Shrikant. Whenever you are ready, I'll put it on
Yes.
the.
Thank you. Yes, yes, yes.
So any other questions or comments until then? I mean, I know I'm super super happy that it worked for me. So let me know if you have some problem, and we can definitely help you out. Uh,
And funnily enough, most of my hackathon projects have also involved web scraping. And I'm just going to drop links to a couple of these in chat so people can maybe get a little bit of inspiration.
Also drop them to me in private as well so that I can post it on all the platforms.
Sounds good. Yes. Continue site. No, that's not what I want. Auto Kindle is. I haven't published the code for that yet. Wonderful.
So here's what we can do. We have another stream starting in 10 minutes. So how about me and Shikaran go off, take a break for 10 minutes, and come back and we'll start by sharing his projects. And then we'll go into GeoGuessr. Sounds good?
That sounds like a plan. And honestly, I need to get something to eat really, really bad.
Me too. I think I'm gonna grab a quick snack myself. So all right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Shrikaran, for such a lovely lesson. And I'm gonna end the broadcast now. So if there are any last minute
Two quick
comments,
shout
yes.
outs. Atul, Way, Dhye, Sanket. I said two, but we're already at four, and I was counting. I had three fingers up, so it's 4 a.m. It is right. It's almost 3:30. So you've got to forgive me on that. But basically, everybody that tuned in, massive shout out to you. Thank you so much for showing up. I genuinely hope you learned something from this. If you have any questions, web scraping questions, my Discord is very similar to what is showing on screen right now. So you can search for Srikaran or SKXRXN on Discord, on Twitter, on Discord and Twitter. Those are probably the two best places to find me. Thank you so much for following along, folks, and yeah, you've been an amazing workshop audience.
All right. So I've posted again a link to Shrikaran's portfolio. Feel free to go ahead, give him a follow, and I'm gonna start broadcast now. Bye bye.